global crickets, and that's all it is going to be, I think. We're just witnesses to this thing, aren't we? We're not supposed to be, but we are. As the global war against people goes on. And we talked about silent weapons, quiet wars, and the data. And I'll just start off the broadcast by explaining that you can do your little part by just keeping separate from it. And it's going to take a little bit of work, like any war in the world, the war on the world. It's gone on for a long time. There's tools that's being used to gather intelligence, as the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars talked about this, is that the brilliance that happened to these people that kind of socially engineer everybody. And, it's not obvious to us until after, usually. Like any good plan, you're not going to come onto it. Only a few will actually see the plan or start to get a hint there's something's going on. And then it takes a long time before everybody else starts to catch on. And then, as we've heard, there's a few people that really stride out and really fight against it give the good fight. And then when they've done their job and they finally get to prevail, everybody jumps in on it. That's kind of how this works. So you can be a part of the resistance. And this data is a big deal. And as we were talking, Windows 10 is trying to force you to do certain things and doing the updates and all that. It's actually coming in a new upgrade. I want you to understand. Also, these people are so disrespectful about you and your stuff, and the objective is you and the takedown of you, actually the use of you as a host for their parasitic functions. That they clearly show us that they don't care about us. They'll claim they're doing it in your benefit and on your behalf, and for our security, even our digital security. But you start listening to these terms, as soon as you hear them, your ears got to peek up a bit, and you got to tune in on what these people are really after. The Windows 10 November update apparently deletes some third-party programs. So here, this company Microsoft is now in their operating system, which they gave for free. And I told you as soon as I saw that, forget that. There's knowing about data. They're handing it to you for free. We already knew the rules about hand for free. You might as well be sitting on something with malware or adware at the minimum, just adware that comes onto your system. These people are in the crux. I mean, Bill Gates that founded this thing, and maybe date myself again. I was in the same area that Bill Gates started his little thing with Apple. I was just right there in that area watching this thing happen. There's stories that were happening then. This guy wasn't such a bright bulb, but he was really sharp in how to utilize things. That much he was sharp at, and we see him now as part of the center focus of the world. Interestingly, in a video telling you that he thinks that population control is a good thing, and that means you're gone or your offspring are gone. That this is the kind of company this guy's come up with. And then you find out later, as we move on, we find out about this technocracy, the gathering up of data, the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars plan. I think it was published in '76. I read a lot of that behind Woodshed to get you to know. It's on the bottom of my Blogcaster pages so that you can see. You're being a place for you is made in their circuit, in their electronic circuit of the global construction of the control of the world, and you're going to be part of that machine. And you'll find a place. You will put yourself right there, and they will utilize you the way you've put yourself, and they have a place for that. That they're not not respectful enough of you enough or your stuff. They now are coming into your system and having at it what they will. And so utility apps such as CC Cleaner, CPU-Z, and even Intel WIDI is reportedly wiped out without permission. Folks, you just have to know this is one of the major tools. And there's a lot of them, but this is one of the things we can focus on. Again, evidence of the war against us, the disrespect in the world of these people and that run corporations. They hide. These are cowards. They hide behind the cover of a corporation, and then the system, which is also corporately aggregated underneath a different form, agrees to bring these in, and then they drop the purpose, the public purpose. The public used to be the people. The public purpose for these corporations, and then gave them the rights of the people. Just a fascinating evolution of how this thing was, folks. We were dupes. This Constitution allowed us to be duped. And I identified that through Article 6. You can see it right there if you kind of know what you're looking at. It just tells you, if you throw down that prejudice you have and whatever it is, and don't throw out the baby with the bathwater either, like you think you know it all. There's still always this thing, this ongoing learning that goes on. This is set up for a takedown. That they need, and there's millions and millions and millions that already use this Windows 10. That this is part and parcel to the problem. That you need to do the work it's going to take in order to remove yourself from the vulnerability. Talk about security vulnerabilities. The whole operating system is a vulnerability to you. Yes, it takes a little bit to understand. Yes, it was okay transition going to another operating system platform. It took a little bit. It took quite a while looking for myself, but I've made the transition. And as soon as we have a couple like this broadcast program I use, can't be used on that. But as soon as I can figure out to get the time, it's just so much time needs to be done, and this is just what you have to put into it. I'm going to have to make a provision to not use this company's product anymore. They get you in, and then it's like almost like a drug addiction. They get you into using, and then you start paying for it, and it's detrimental to you, and you continue to pay for it. So this is one of those things that's fading fast, just from a utility. They're telling us about all these things now. There's nothing uncovered, and if you feel that you're a part of being, the resistance against this, one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to understand these technologies and how they're really controlling your stuff. I mean, I just don't understand this. I'd like to wonder who thought they could come into your system and disrespect your property that way. And they do it under legalisms like licenses, but that's not the truth. That's just an excuse. Anyway, understand that the Windows 10 is aggressively moving into your system. Microsoft is aggressively taking control and wanting to monitor the world essentially through these platforms. Linux, until I see something else, Linux appears to be independent of all that. And so you might want to consider distributions. They've really come a long way. I mean, I remember the days I used to be one of those guys that could sit and enjoyed, building your system. I don't do that anymore. I don't even have the concentration capacity anymore with what I am doing in the real world for things that actually need to be done with what I found important. Not that those are not important. In fact, I was thanking Grimner for being the guy that does the digital work behind the scenes, because I can't keep up with the digital toolbox you need to have in order to keep contact in the so-called social media. It's just too much anymore. It's a lot. So, but you're going to have to figure out ways to cut your ties to this benefit security system. It's just not going to be another way to do it. So you can be a part of that resistance as well. Fascinating new technology come out before I move on to another thing here and getting into the war on the world. This technology. See, I was in this field. I'm just. Invention is just part of me. Not that I'm that great an inventor. In fact, I know that I'm really not. I can do things. I can get really, really close. I've done a couple of inventions that weren't patented, that were stolen, that were not filed in the right time, but were done later. That I knew the idea was there, but I've seen people that are really the inventors in the world. I've been a pleasure to work with them. That the people's minds to come up with real solutions, actually solving problems, or at least moving us to a better day. We have the capacity as people to do that. So I've always been amazed at what the mind of men and women can come up with to advance things. And here we have this thing called Li-Fi now. It's not a lie, it's actually the truth. But Li-Fi has just been tested in the real world, and it's 100 times faster than Wi-Fi. Sorry, Wi-Fi, we had some good times together. Li-Fi is light-driven transmission for your wireless computer system. And they use the simple little LED, that little device that shines light. The little device, I don't know if you know this, some of you should. The LED is really just a diode that emits light. The diode is simply the gate, the part of the gate that they use to build the computers. It's a 1 and a 0, it's on and off. And so this same technology in the transistor was turned into a semiconductor technology, utilizing barriers and gating potentials and all this kind of neat stuff, and not getting into all that, that they can now use that very same diode that that becomes the logic systems for these computers that are now being exploited by companies like Microsoft. And they can turn that around and emit light, make them so that these same diodes emit light, and then they can pulse them at the speeds of a diode. The light can be pulsed at the speeds of a diode, and another receiving device in light can pick it up. That they operate at the speed of the transistor, and then the transmission of the carrier is at the speed of light, whatever frequency that diode is made to produce. That they're now putting data transfer on light beams, which is fascinating at one level, fantastic at another, and then it's a double-edged sword. First of all, it's going to be possibly, unless you'll be able to at some point have a better security of, see, it's not electromagnetic radiation in the common sense. It's using light, which is electromagnetic spectrum, but at any rate, it's not electromagnetic emanations is what picks up right now, that unless you're in that light field that's pulsing at billions of times a second to transfer this data at these high rates, you're not going to be able to get in. There's no one that can see that data. The other problem is that inside that field, someone may be able to have the data. So it limits who can get this data by light, and then whoever is underneath that light. So that's an interesting thing there right by itself. So there's fascinating technologies. The problem is, as fast as these go, if you're not being resistant to these companies like Microsoft, your data goes out that much faster as well. All the sensors that are in your computer, in your phones, and all this other stuff goes out of your system even that much faster. So while I see it's a great deal to be able to go have data transferring very, very quickly. What they're talking about here is 224 gigabytes per second. I think somebody had calculated that was like 18 movies, DVD style high definition movies, 18 movies being transferred every second versus capacity. So fantastic technology, but see, we got this double-edged sword, and they get us to go into this, and all your LED lights will be see, this is the other thing. Remember, they went from incandescent bulbs to LEDs. See, they wanted to blame it on carbon trading and all this other stuff. In fact, what I believe, this was moving into this data acquisition, this security state condition. Global warming is a lie. The carbon tax is a lie. They're going to try and make everybody less applicable, less able to get a power, so you're going to have to reduce your usages. But the technology they give you to replace it is actually used for a different purpose. And this is one of them. Fantastic technology, but here we're locked into this system, this digital system. And I just want to remind you, these evidences that we've shown that they're already practicing with how to flick those switches off. So again, to cut yourself out of the system, it's not quite so easy, and you're going to have to make these things, otherwise you're susceptible to whoever has their finger on that switch or over the blinder of that light switch. So fantastic technology, 100 times faster than Wi-Fi. Interesting security features, both sides, but the biggest one I think is that for us, because we're oblivious, it becomes the system has 100 times more things it can collect, 100 times faster things it can be collecting from in this multiplex sensory world that we're adopting and we're taking on ourselves. These phones are just concentrated evil, folks. That's all I can tell you. And you hear it in your TVs. Your TVs are watching you. I mean, this is all sci-fi stuff. Even when I was working on it, it was heck, the speeds they're doing now, when I was working in the industry, were completely they were not even thought of being able to be done because of the material science just wasn't there. This is what's fascinating about this, is that I'm seeing a time when this is 128 gigabytes of RAM on a chip, for a RAM chip on a computer just to run your software, that wasn't even conceivable because of material science limitations. There just wasn't an ability to do it. So, well, unless you wanted to go back to the room size computer. So fascinating technology, but they're using it as a plan to bring us into servitude. We're going to have to figure out what parts we can use, what parts we can't. Within the use, we're going to have to figure out where our vulnerabilities are and limit those vulnerabilities. So enough on that. Just in the war against us, folks, this is no joke. Nothing is secret, and we really have to do a whole lot more. We have to make that decision, folks. Do you aid it or do you fight it? There's no middle ground here. The only problem with the saying, okay, I'm going to resist this, is the middle ground is whether you're going to have enough friends around to help you pick up where you don't, like I focus on certain things. I need people to be around me to focus on things I can't, like we were talking earlier. When Grimner, we were talking about doing hooking up all the social video accounts or something, however that works. I'm not involved with all that. I don't have Facebook. I don't have a YouTube account that I've set up, but people have set them up for my broadcast, which I'm grateful for. And now Grimner did some more. So if I don't have the time really to be looking at that, there's just too many things to keep up with. But someone can help to move on things that we're trying to get over to people in this. I find the internet as a limiting, because it's not like being in a place that you're on a main thoroughfare. People have to find you. And if you don't speak out, you don't get your name out and don't know how to do that through the so-called social networks, and sadly Facebook has become one of those centers, then you're not going to, you're going to be behind the woodshed with a handful of listeners every week, wishing there was more, only because we need to know, we are in an important position. We may be looking at the end of history, and I don't mean from the standpoint of a major global battle, world war. That's just another sign to me if that happens. We're talking about the end of history as we know it. We're in that time possibly, and so we have a lot of people to make aware that this is it, because the transition is going to be very interesting, and maybe not so bad for some, and maybe terrible for others. So I bring evidences of these things so that we get us beyond the discussion. We get beyond the question. I was talking about this weekend. I won't get into this other thing, but with the facts laid out before a whole bunch of people that should be interested, they will not accept the facts laid out, and they will argue with the facts and create questions around it. Instead of taking something, realizing, as I said, we have a house afire. Are we going to choose to put that fire out and save the families in it, which is us? Are we going to save ourselves in the house of fire that's been built, that was arsoned against us, or are we going to not? Are we going to stand there and watch it? We're going to question, we're going to question the wind patterns around the fire, and whether how many people might be in the building. No, I guess you could do that, and that's what people are doing. We have to stop that. That's why I get down to the point, folks. Just find a wrong, you have to be made right. Why? It doesn't matter how big it is. Just engage it, because that experience will get you into more and bigger things, and you'll find, I'm sure you'll find people, as few in number as they are, you'll find people that are at least focused on something, and that small number can do a great amount. It's really surprising when you put the focused energy. It's kind of like the magnifying glass. You might be able to use it for a lot of ways, but you can also concentrate that light that you use. You take for granted that you're using it to magnify its properties, magnify something, but you turn that around and you put the light source that was coming into the object and bouncing the light into that thing, and you use the light itself, you can cause a fire yourself. Concentrated effort. So I guess I'm asking you to become the magnifier, right? Okay, whatever analogy works for you, please just find the wrong you need to be made right. So, speaking on this global war against us, and hope you will. Solomon called in. I think I got this right, and I hope I understand him correctly when he's talking about this. He called in on Freakers Ball, and I invite you all to tune into Freakers Ball on Friday nights. It's been going on for years and years. A little bit of discussion, a little bit of music, and have a good time. You jump in the chats. Everyone has a good time. That he calls in on Friday nights, and I'm not sure if it's every other Friday night or more often now, but you can hear him on, he calls in from Brazilistan, and gives us an observation. He listens to our broadcast, and he listens to other broadcasts on WT and RLM, and he has criticisms, actually observations, and he contributes information. I encourage you to listen to it, and then pick up where he comes in and kind of amplifies things. And he's very, and thank you very much for appreciating what I do behind the woodshed, Solomon. And then for all you all, he believes that apparently I'm doing, I'm giving the message that I need to be giving. And yet he came up with a critique, which is great. And that's why I ask you, like, if you have a critique, markonthebeast@yahoo.com. He does it over the air because he can't. He's out and away. He's got his, in Brazilistan, we heard they'll kill you just as easy. The government will just shoot you. They don't care. That he was critical of as a designation that I made last week, and regarding battlefield America being handled by the cops and not through the military. And he is certainly centered on the shape-shifting militaries, as he says, that is running the show here, the force, the condition around the world that we talk about all the time as well. And I think he took a little bit of issue, and it's a helpful criticism here. So don't consider this a negative thing here. I want to address certain things because I think what he brings up is correct, except to the extent that we're dealing with our own problems. So I want to address that part. I said that in America, in battlefield America, the cops will be doing this thing against you. It won't be the military. However, I've got let's see if I can explain this. I've got a communication and comprehensive things here that I have a problem with. And part of that is that there's so much to actually say that I really can only choose as I go certain aspects. And so I try to stick to the point I'm trying to make. That because part of the problem is people see with their eyes and they think through their prejudices. And so that's part of, and that's not the entirety thing, and it's not a judgment. It's just the way I've noticed we work. We all do this. And so I have to be careful on this, that yes, understand that there's a military problem behind all this. I talk about martial law. That is the overpressing point. But because people see with their eyes and not with an inner knowledge, they don't use it. They block that. And then any inner knowledge is prejudice. Then people won't if I got a problem here, the initial attacks are coming from the police, so I can't tell people to look for the military, even though the police are executing military procedures. And that's whether or not the beat cop actually understands that. And that's yet another problem, right? So I also speak to this thing in the context of the police of policy, and that's what I was referring to last week, where I was talking about the policy is what gives them a bit of license. It's what they test you with, that you have to, no different than the TSA, the other policing, policy implementation state, implementing the military order, as we identify through the NNDAA. And lots of other things, back to 1917. I've talked about all this. All this comes with my discussion. This is the problem. I don't want to have to re-talk about this all the time. I have to hope that you listen and throw this in on your own. That's just a faith I have to have in all y'all to put all this stuff together as I'm talking about it. That the policy that you're dealing with is driven by the military forces behind it that you may not understand. In practice, if you want to get anywhere with these policy members, these policing members, these cops in their institutions, you have to address that costume that you see. But you have to hold in your mind what and who you are actually dealing with without letting that on. So this is a dynamic here. It's an interaction with a very dangerous thing. And you have to figure, it's like dealing with that fire. You have to figure out how to put it out without hurting yourself. And you don't really talk about the fire when you're fighting it. You're just fighting it. And this is because we're dealing with somebody else, someone who also thinks, someone who has a position, whatever it is, has an intention, wants to just do their job. You have to be pretty delicate sometimes. You can't walk in there and talk to them and say, oh, you're a military, and that's not just going to go far. So in reference to my comment last week when I was saying it'll be the cops, not the military, I'm explaining what the people will meet when they go right now, because it may change, but right now it's the police that will work against you. That's who you will be talking with, is the police, to change the policy, which we will die from because we don't go in and change it. The cops are the military execution squads, no doubt. I've said this over and over. Again, I don't feel comfortable to keep repeating it either. That's all we do, be repeating myself, because it's all the same information actually. But I'm trying to bring out different nuances, different proofs. I'm hoping something will stick with people to use, and they go down and wherever they're going to go and they use this stuff, they put this in the back of their mind as they know what the condition they're in. They're not looking for something that doesn't exist and trying to deal with that. They're looking for what they'll find and still dealing with it in the right way. But at the point of dealing with the police on operating policy, practically it won't go far to refer the cops as military at all. I mean, this is not going to work. They will just think you as a nut. So the military right now, if you look around battlefield America, the military, and there's reasons for this as well that I won't discuss more. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about it. The military will be held back as much as possible in America, so not to rile the natives, remember? And the heavy-handed, they're not going to bring that heavy hand in the military because it's not also needed. The people control themselves fairly effectively, at least right now. And the surveillance tries to pick you apart and divide you and pick you apart. So that's the other technique, that they don't really need to bring the military up. So you're going to be dealing with these costumes that are looking like police. So what we've seen in the last few years with the local acquisitions of military hardware, I think it was a test to see how much the people would take. And there's just now this pushback. People will absorb a lot of abuse. So that much of the military hardware that is now causing a pushback will be pulled back, such as we hear the bayonets, like what do you need a bayonet here, and the MRAPs that are not being used inside of the drug war, which brings up a whole other discussion. How about if we just work, some of you find out that the drug war was no good, we have all the evidence, and work to stop that war. There's about 3 or 4 or 5 of these things. I don't know where they are, how many there are now. These wars they use against us domestically to justify using military hardware, the limits of which are figured out by the military behind the scenes. And the government keeps very close tabs of all this. This is what the problem is about the surveillance and why they want to hear, why the social, like Facebook became the biggest surveillance tool that they just keep the pulse of the people. All they got to keep track of is where the natives are getting restless. They won't openly make them restless. This is the pressure valve thing I've talked about a long time ago. So in the United States of America, there's still this sentiment, and it's a proper one, but I mean, it's still being held. It's not yet been vanquished yet in people, that the military won't be able to make any major showing because it doesn't need to, and it's learned that the people will tolerate the local police to be the armed force sufficient to control them as the military. And this is no difference in how the courts are working in this country. When you look closely enough, you'll see the evidence. But you don't walk in and say, hey, you're a military court. Hey, you're an admiralty court. What I've told you before is you acknowledge what the symbols are in the court to tell you what jurisdiction they are, which is really just legislative, administrative. However, you deal with them on that level. You deal with the costume with the knowledge they're not what the costume is. So if you walk into an admiralty court, you don't complain about it. You give your admiralty remedies. And you track the language. Well, I keep telling you, you got to track language. You'll do it everywhere. So for now, with respect to this battlefield America and saying the police are, don't look at the military, look at the police. The police will will execute the military condition. And that's what I was speaking to last week. What people will meet when they address the police actions that are going on. So police actions, and isn't that also, when you say it that way, isn't that a military euphemism for military action or occupation? Then I don't think I need to cut too fine that distinction here. I'm not speaking in absolutes. We can, and I do periodically, but there's a bigger thing going on. I want people to be more aware of on how to identify what we're up against. And I hope Solomon and others, anybody who had that question. And I appreciate, it's scary to hear someone's listening that close to what I'm saying, because I'm telling you folks, I come here with tabs on a board to talk about, but I don't know what I'm going to say. I have an idea where I'm going to go, and I only speak to what comes to me at the moment. So that's almost a scary thing to hear someone's listening so critically, but that you are, I appreciate that, because I don't know that I've been too wrong. I really don't. And I do appreciate the lack of actual close communication on this, and then the demands of the broadcast. But I want to address some of these things, because you have to understand, I'm talking about, I can only hit so many words at a time. I only want to go to so many places. These are very critical things to understand. He was absolutely right to focus on this condition that we're in, but I'm also speaking to you of what you're going to find when you get out there, and then that gives you the idea of maybe you have to approach, that's an obstacle in the battlefield you're going to have to be able to deal with, because we really don't have the time to make excuses. The active member is going to be the police. The costume doing the authority is going to be the police, even though the military is the battlefield America that we talk about, is behind the scenes. And it's really a strict military condition, notwithstanding the fact that not many people can actually see that. And that's why I refer to Libra Code, which has also now been swept away by these people. The Libra Code explained to us. It was just a tool to explain to us. Those of us that didn't understand it, that are innocent to this, are given the clue in the Libra Code of what condition you can, when you see a condition, explains us when you see a condition in the world or in your locale, that you can define it a particular way. And that's what the point is. You take all this information as a tool. So, back to Solomon's point, yes, you're right, there's a military, strictly a military condition, but the people in engaging this now, especially in America right now, are going to be dealing with policies, completely policies, even though those policies are implementing them a military control. It's really a military occupation as far as I can tell. It probably always has been. So I also wanted to announce, Solomon has scooped me as well, even though we're beyond the media behind Woodshed. He scooped me on Friday, and I haven't been able to get to it, but I want to get to it. He mentioned that there's now a field manual for the law of war, and I did get that around the 1st of November 5th. If that isn't an interesting time to receive that document, November 5th in the anonymous mask branding. But November 5th, there's a law of war manual, and I read through parts of it, and folks, he's right. He's going to refer to it. Absolutely, it's kind of devastating in a way, even though you know what's going on. Y'all need to find that. I'll be talking about it. I'm going to read it. I want to do it. I wanted to do a little more justice than just reading it, though. As I was reading it, it's just so rich, so absolutely rich with confirming everything I've said and where we are, where we're going. It's the roadmap of how we already done. We're really kind of done, and the military knows that. And you just don't get this document out unless they did know that. That I told you a long time ago, forget your guns at this point. They've got us so well done, it's not even funny. But there's some big, terrible stuff in that manual, if you know what you're looking at. And it kind of makes the Libra Code look like instructions on how to play tag. Where they've moved this is just pretty horrendous. If you even thought that you had some constitutional protection and the government was limited form, remember, I was giving you the clues that we were given in lots of ways. Restatements of Cicero. Scalia said that in the time of war, the laws fall silent, folks. This is it. We're at that point. We're at the point, like I'm telling you, I just, with the world, the rumors of wars, the wars and rumors of wars, and we see what's going on around the world against people, and the diabolical nature of the psychopath has risen to the top and imposing concentrated evil. We're in the time that looks like we may be at the end of history. And I say that with a couple of levels of dimensions that we'll be facing. And I'm here, I don't know. At some point it happens. Whether this is the time, I don't know. If we don't respond to this, even if it isn't, we're kind of toast anyway, but for a different reason. But we're looking at we really are in an interesting time. Just as we were told here, we were talking here, coming through the transition in the Chinese, you're, welcoming the interesting times that you might have, knowing that might not be so cool. We're there, folks. All the clues are here. So I hope, Solomon, that answers to that. I hope it was adequate for that, and I hope you all understand there's a really big thing to talk about here. I really don't have that ability to go through it. I'm not that organized, to tell you the truth. I really do just approach this ad hoc. You're hearing what comes from me without a filter, in a way, and I don't know how much more honest I can be about that. This is truly what I've done research and held in my mind all this time. I've not liked it, but it's a reality. I'll say a reality. I've got to be cognizant that we make that reality too. So we make up how we perceive as well. I said we look through our prejudices. We look through our ignorance too. What do we don't know? We don't know what we don't know. So there's a lot behind all this, and Solomon brings a whole nother level that I don't really go into too much. He picks up, though I'm speaking to it, and I appreciate that insight, that critical review and insight. I appreciate. I don't. Again, everyone is going to have to see that for themselves. When they see that, when you see this, folks, really the decision's made. The decision's made. It's really not a choice. And there is no more questions. It's just a matter of where do you put down and what do you start doing. And so, moving on to the war, not as perception, but as in the real world, so-called, this real world. Remember I was talking about getting back over to the Middle East, and we're talking about Russia and Turkey, and there was a big Turkey shoot here this Thanksgiving, if you had missed it. Turkey shot a Russian bomber out of the sky, and I won't get into all the nuances of all that nonsense, and the immaturity behind Turkey, but there's a way bigger story there. I don't even know if I've spent enough time, but I've told you a long time ago, I didn't know why Putin, I should say, in the Russian is Putin. I always miss that. But I asked you a long time ago, why hasn't Putin put the S-400s in? Well, after that shoot down, that gave him all the excuse to go ahead and put those S-400s, state-of-the-art missile systems that can attack 36 targets at once, jet fighter targets, and anything else in the sky, even into space. These S-400 units, Putin seals Syria's airspace, was exactly what he's done after they did that. He said that Turkey was an ally, a coalition partner that stabbed him in the back. There's a whole thing about Turkey. What's fascinating to me is watching Turkey become a focus on this. Russia's doing this so smartly that I don't know if you all understand the history and Istanbul. What used to be called, it's illegal now to call this, so I'm going to say it on the air and be a criminal in Turkey. Even though I did have Thanksgiving. I missed the day. I was so busy writing, I missed the day. But 2 days later, wait a minute, that was a turkey dinner. That was Thanksgiving. So sorry for not passing around the day. I'm so busy here. They're just another day for me, it seems, for the most part. So I understand there was a turkey shoot. The turkey may be Turkey, and Istanbul sitting right there now in a meeting that was going on for economic development. Now this shooting, Russia's now going to place economic sanctions on Turkey. Istanbul's the focus, folks. Damascus, go back to your history and even the Bible, go read it. Damascus is a focus. Istanbul is not Istanbul, it's Constantinople. And I'm getting this from another source that studies this stuff. Although I've been focused on this area, like I've told you, since my uncle was focusing me on it since way long ago, not knowing how this would work out, just watching in awe how it has been working out, that Turkey now becomes the Turkey's goose is cooked, folks. If I can just tell it, that if Putin plays this correct, Constantinople goes back to the Orthodox Christianity. If that happens, or I don't know when that happens in regard to the timing and chronology, we're in the time of the end of things, folks. I just tell you that. Now, not the end of the world, just the end of the history that we know. So you're looking at some potentially just awesome moments here. But again, watch the ball. The ball's not really obvious here. You really got to watch the shadow of the ball we're looking at. And Putin was allowed to do this because Turkey did a dumb move, my estimation. And I was saying, why didn't they put the S-400 missile systems in there earlier? Again, the patience of Putin, of Russia right now, is really, in my mind, winning the day. Whether or not ultimately Russia can withstand all this, I don't know. And I'm not siding with Putin. I'm looking at a dynamic. I've told you, I think this whole world system is tied in. When the BRICS was developed and Russia was a part and China was a part and Brazilistan was a part, and they tried to make a faux competition against the World Bank, I realized these are all on one other dimension, all the same players. But they all have on a different dimension all their geopolitical interests as well. They got to play their position inside that other play, correct? And so when Putin put these S-400s, even the United States stopped flying their jets. See, nobody has. Remember, I told you this. Why I said this? The submarine had fired the cruise missiles out of the ocean, the Mediterranean, and they actually worked. Those things had never been fired before by Russia, or for the purpose, or against a foe. And they finally got tested, and they work. That these S-400s are so technologically advanced. As soon as those things went in, the United States, NATO, I should say, NATO stopped flying. Now, what's silent among all this, I notice, is they're talking about all the aircraft are not flying. You know, Russia's flying, and I don't know about France. And it still looks to me, like I told you at the Paris escapade, that I think France and Russia have a backdoor deal, somewhat. Understanding now, Russia knows that an ally, collaborator, will stab him in the back. Don't you think that that's already been taken care of? Those French jets can go down by an S-400 just as easily. That we hear nothing flying now after those S-400s went into place. Just why I was thinking they should have been gone in a long time ago. If you don't think this is a high-stakes game, folks, you really aren't really paying attention. Now, so remember, this deception that's being done by the United States, the Allies, over is this fictional. Again, there's real people believing there's a caliphate, but it was created by the support of the United States, NATO, and France as well, and Qatar and Saudi Arabia in particular paying for this. A lot of tow missiles being thrown in there by the United States. You folks, if we just pulled all that support out, I don't think is evaporates, okay? So it's a fiction. It's just another straw man. I don't have any feelings one way or the other about it. It's just a tool by Zio West to do what it wants to do, and it needs to interrupt what is the end game, which may be this. The door is open for against Constantinople. I've told you this before, folks. When Yemeni got attacked by Saudi Arabia, watch out. This looks like the end of history here. The way the books were written, this is what they predicted. Do I know it's going to happen? Absolutely not. What am I behind the woodshed? I just noticed I'm fascinated by how consistent it is. You have to understand that we don't know, folks, what's going on at some point. But the military outwardly in the Middle East is the military controlling this entire system. It's the force that silently sits for all these people to violate us. Right after the jet that got shot down, the Turkish shoot, or the Russian jet, not only did Russia bring in the S-400s, but then Russia goes and destroys a Turkish convoy headed to support from Turkey, going to support Syrian militants. And Erdogan was silent. The same guy that won't apologize for shooting down a jet without, it doesn't look like that the Russians were even in Turkey, let alone if they were, there was no cause to shoot down the jet at all. Though this guy won't apologize, Turkey president, Turkey won't apologize to Russia. He's now making some concessions. But when Russia turned around and destroyed their truck convoys, which are supporting the Syria militants, the terrorists from Russia's standpoint, and from, more importantly, Syria's standpoint, who Russia is helping, Erdogan is silent, has to tell you a whole lot about what punching the bully in the nose. Together with the economic sanctions that are now going on in Turkey, against Turkey from Russia, Turkey is the second largest contributor to the Russian economy, which means Turkey is going to be in some real trouble on its own economically. That was a second smart move or third or fourth smart move now since the Turkey shoot. That we have a real dynamic condition that I just have to admire the patience of the Russians at this playing this game, if it is a game. And I say that because I do believe part of this is a game. It's a serious, deadly game. People are dying around it. But there is, remember, that part of that global construction sits there to guide this. And as that works, again, all the global players, all the national players moving to that region, we're told that it was going to happen. It's now declared as well, right at this time to act. China launches war on is after terrorists execute the Chinese hostage that we heard about before. So now we see the excuse for another nation now to come in and be justified to stop this by fighting this fiction that the United States or NATO, Zio West created, and now is being used Well, being used against them at some level, but used toward the end that was made to be used for. China is going to now have license to come in. See, Turkey shooting down the Russian jet gave license for the Russians to shoot anything in the airspace. And then Obama, he's so smart, I understand it through a Twitter line, I think Grimner sent it. Obama is saying, does Russia deserved that jet to be destroyed. If that didn't give Putin the license to shoot everything down the United States has, I don't know what did. How stupid is this guy? Well, maybe not. Maybe that's the plan. But they're playing it real well. I don't think that Russia's getting in war with Turkey. They have a better plan. There's internal strifes that Russia knows about and probably maybe fomenting as well. Right in Istanbul, it was illegal to say Constantinople, but I'll say it. Right in Constantinople, the major player on the underlying dimensional stage here, of the indicators of how we're moving along in history, pre-told to us. They are right there. They are right there to do what take out Istanbul from within, their own thing. That we see the players coming on. We got now ISIS is now going to be attacked by the Chinese. China is now in the region with the same purpose as Russia, and denied by rest of NATO, even though they say they bombed ISIS. United States bombs ISIS for over a year and goes nowhere. That we hear also right in the same week, folks. The concentration's happening. China to open its first military base in Africa, signs deal with Djibouti, the U.S. general says. Now, where is this place? This is right in the center of the Mediterranean. Excuse me, of the Asiatic, I think. It's right at the point, down at the opening, where the United States military has to cross through. In fact, there's a whole lot of military there. The United States has a base there too. If you don't see the tensions that can rise, folks, two navies in the same bar, it ain't gonna work. Okay, then I can't handle it in the bars. It's not gonna work outside so well. But this is now we're seeing there's no limitations now. Everybody's in on Syria because of ISIS. The excuse is being used by everyone, and we're seeing a concentration of that was declared in history. That I just beyond anything else, I'm really fascinated about all that. But this ganging up in this area, folks. I mean, don't underestimate it. It doesn't seem like it matters to you, but I think it does. I think it does. When you see the Pope also running around the countryside, like I've told you, and they all deny what's going on. They deny the underpinnings of the structure they've built, as they slowly work against you. They work, little bullies. They bully everybody, and they talk nice words. Well, those bullies in the Middle East are being called out by Bolivia. If you don't think the world is starting to get involved. Bolivia declares Israel a terrorist state. 42 years visa free travel called off. Really, the titles just really tell me a whole lot. There's folks, if you don't read the blogcaster, you're missing a ton of details. I just don't have the time to get to them all. It's so fascinating to look and pick the carcass of this thing apart, like we did for Thanksgiving. Not every one of these stories, but most of these stories I provide here for reports, for evidence, have the power to give you exactly what the story is going on through history and what is coming to bear. Israel as a terrorist state. Wow. We all know that. But to have someone step up, I guess is the point for me. You have to step up and call it out, otherwise you've agreed with it. Everyone's ganging up on everyone, no one's saying anything. So I had to laugh. I laughed. I laughed out loud. How much more bizarre does it start to get? When the gangs of New York, the Sicilian Mafia offers Big Apple protection for psychopathic ISIS, actually petitioning the government to be able to do a better job than New York City itself, the Mafia having better connections in order to stop ISIS. what nonsense is this? That I thought that was actually a brilliant move, but it was it's the humor. This is the comedy club of the world here going on. That the mafia, the Italian mafia, steps up and says it can do a better job and may be able to when you find out what their inside connections are. You know, it's like any other insider, the infiltrator. They get inside the system. No different than the sustainable development crowd. They've gotten inside your system. You don't think that's a mafia? You don't think that's organized crime? You think it's not possible? They did it. They did it in the last 30 years. You think the mafia has all that? You think they have the connections they need? I actually think that maybe they could do a better job, but except for that the whole thing's a fiction. It's a waste of time and money. That's the one thing that shows how stupid this is. But isn't it just a fascination to watch that the mafia stepped up and actually asked the government if they could help? Put them in charge. And they did it with a straight face. The reason is that from the mafia is that the government, the FBI, Homeland Security, and New Yorkers, they often act too late or fail to see the complete picture of what's happening due to a lack of human intelligence. Well, it's not just that. This is a plan, folks. So they're not seeing something. So this guy who thinks he can thinks he sees the big picture, and he can help. Well, he may have the human intelligence. He may have those connections. You know, everyone gets served by some kind of organized criminal for their garbage disposal, don't they? In the restaurants and whatever, and they're probably whatever. Who knows? I don't even know no more. But isn't that just a fascination that we're living in a world when a notorious crime syndicate petitions the government to stop a terrorist? I'm speechless. This is just too fascinating. Gangs going after gangs, going after gangs. It's just one mercenary position after the next, isn't it? What happened, folks? What happened to us? What happened to us? Except that we were crickets. What happened to us? How many more questions do we need? How many more things do we have to answer? So I say, don't worry about the size of the. I talk about some pretty. I mean, when I'm not on this war stuff, because nobody can really do anything about the global war thing. But when I talk about the wars that you're dealing with at home, wherever your home is, you know, some of those things are pretty big. You know, we're up against the federal government, what we do, and the mining law, and ranchers, and we're doing all that kind of stuff. People don't understand what we're really actually doing. They really don't understand, and I know that because they don't do it. They look from outside and they use their little prejudices to view with their little pea brains what they think we know and what we think we've done. And everybody, I do it too, I suppose. We all kind of do this on someone else. And I particularly when we go critical on somebody, we don't know really. That when you get involved, it's a whole, I mean, it's like, you know the people who know from those that don't. I can just tell it to you that way. And you won't know that until you engage. And it doesn't matter how big. Don't look for the big game. Look for something you can handle. Even the smallest wrong that needs to be made right needs to be made right. And if you're and I get this a lot actually. I don't know what I'm looking to do. That's fine. I'm not saying that you have to if you don't feel it. You gotta find the thing that you're really passionate about. That definitely has to happen. But don't blinder yourself to find the thing. Just find anything. Just get in the practice of, it's like a habit, like a muscle you need to exercise. It's there in us. It was really our duty to protect ourselves. It was our duty to watch out for the criminals, right? So what is this war on people happen? You know, we think we have rights. We think we have these, everyone calls them so-called liberties and freedoms. You know, behind the woodshed, I don't necessarily, I agree with the fact that they exist, but they're not what people think. That we have also these reverse discussions, these like double speak in the news. We can't almost make it out. But other things come clear and we can predict by them. Like we say, this war that's on the people in Europe, like the Paris attacks, which precipitated France moving over into Syria and apparently actually fighting ISIS as Russia is overseeing that action. We said that there was a at least, well, multiple reasons why Paris happened. It was not, I think there was a state attack. I also can see part of it. Nobody died. That would be like a hoax. It was part of drills. They used video from the drills to make it look like it was part of the knots. You don't see that anybody actually dies. But there's this. It could be a false flag. Actually, something did happen, but that was. But then there's on top of this there was actually an attack on the state. All that I can see being in there. But I said that one of the purposes for the state was to further lock down and get the concurrence with the population, so they could get that aircraft carrier out, make more war, and lock the people down. And you see now they're locking military. Now the military came out in France. Now this is the distinction I guess I'll make for Solomon. We don't see that way in America. We're not going to see that military that way in America that way, I don't think yet. We may eventually. What we're going to see is the police. They'll look like there'll be more military costumes, but it'll be really the local policing doing. That the purpose is to lock people down. And the overriding amplification is that if we can discuss a thing, it's like advertising. Like someone said, it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad as long as they're talking about you. That we see a multiple proof here again, where we see this report: Paris climate activists put under house arrest using emergency laws. That we now see that the government will put this on just someone exercising their free speech, if you will, their right to assemble. Our right, the United States, we have this right, as long as it's in the right spot, right? In the assembly spot, we get to do this now. Not used to be that way, but we get to freely do this in our spot. That the climate activists, which is also just something in the news now, because it's all, they got to get, it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, but they can use it. The climate is in the news now because it's coming to that treaty time. That the activists are put under house arrest under emergency laws. No due process, right? Just suspicion. Not even suspicion, just the fact you did something that the government didn't like is what is spilled out of this Paris thing. And you'll hear the people, France is the point of liberty. You don't tell a Frenchman or French woman what to do and not to protest. We have the right to speak, and yet they're going to do it. The government's doing it anyway. Let's move that over to America. Any activist, anybody they don't like, under emergency laws will be put in prison. What's NDAA, folks, but not this law? Already in place. It's here. As I'm telling you, we're done as far as all this goes. We better figure this one out. We don't have time anymore. No, I don't believe the climate change. I don't think there's any activism in climate. That's just the promotion of plunder and fraud and crime, just the felony, just big time, concentrated evil. That's what I think it is. But these people have the right to say it, don't they? I mean, I don't have a problem with them saying it. To me, it just makes them look like ignorant people. That's okay. The problem is, I guess, the ignorant people can win over other minds, and that's a scary thought. But Paris climate activists are put under house arrest. At least it's house arrest and not put in jail, right? Well, they're a little bit softer on how they do it in Europe. Here, they shoot you dead, right? They shoot you dead, and if you survive, they stick you in a prison cell, beat your head in the walls, right? In the United States, that's how they do it here already. But here it is, folks, already. They get their climate change stated, this big thing coming on. They say that there's activists that there's some kind of opposition to a fraud, or a concurrence with a fraud by its opposition to climate changing. Like no one notices the climate change, folks. It's winter. They're in the same hemisphere. It's winter. And I don't know about you, but we're seeing some pretty cold temperatures, and they're admitting it's unseasonable. Granted, folks, that doesn't mean that we're going into global cooling, although, we don't know, but the indication's more appropriate that way. But see, folks, where it's colder here, it's going to be warmer somewhere else. That's what the Earth does. It's pretty neat how balanced this system is. But this whole climate debate is one forcing another servitude. It's another war on you in the carbon market, which is again going to underpin currencies and governments, all of them. This is why you start seeing the Putin is not necessarily different than any other ones. That this climate activists are being put into, you're stopping our people from from promoting the fact that ice is going away, polar bears are dying. Well, none of that has happened, and no one's really pointed that out. really. I mean, some people do, but not a lot. You don't hear it from the mainstream, certainly. That this climate change is just a part of something called sustainable development. This global governance plan, what I read to you is A2030. The extension, the movement, the next 15 years implementation of the agenda, the program of action that we know as Agenda 21, that the Bar Association completely promotes and completely imposes upon you every day in your life. All this stuff is coming down through democracy and the rule of law. It's a brand. You might as well just stick it together. And part of that brand that implements sustainable development is a method. And so I want to point out this next little report here that shows you another layer of this thing, dealing with the climate change, and then you had the encyclical with the Pope, and talking about unifying all the religions, and then we get this telltale sign of the method of what's going on in the world that I can directly attach to something we're doing and know exactly what they're doing with this one word. And it is this process that we've identified, the collaborators, the consensus-based outcomes that are derived from a plan inserted to a system that's beholding to the discretion of that system. In other words, all these participants, these stakeholders, these partners get together to do this thing, this word. And by their participation and this word, by doing this thing, they agree with the premise position that they're talking about. And that will be what the outcome ends up being. And if you don't agree, you get cut out. And here's the title, and then the word's the first one, so you pay attention. This tells you exactly how this system is unified already in a method that they destroy us by. Dialogue between religions essential, says Pope on first day of African visit. Dialogue. They always want a dialogue. They dialogue because they bring the subject matter outcome that they want you to talk about. And when you start talking about that, you agree it's a valid premise to talk about, even though it could be the felony against you. The dialogue between religions, folks, tells me all these supposed religions have agreed to come together to talk about what the Pope wants to talk about. In a unified consensus-based, where did you hear consensus, folks? But in climate change as well. It's uniform, this method. Again, just to explain, so that I say this partly because I want you to know about it, and I want you to know it was determinable a long while back, and it's now of record. You can go find it. The lawsuit of Jefferson Mining District versus Kiddshopper was on this method. That was in 2013. So this is how long we've been living with this implementation that continues to go on, that all of us have to identify and stop. That the dialogue between religions means that they're in a dialogue that may not actually be the premise that underpins their belief system, but they've agreed to abandon that in favor of dialoguing on the subject matter that have brought them to dialogue about, which ultimately will be the unification of their religions through the abandonment of the faith by their practice. They can continue to practice it, but that they will be agreeing to implement a different type of belief system, in this case sustainable development. Why? To help the poor, folks. It's brilliant, this idea, this technique. They really are brilliant people, beyond me, folks. These people really are inventors. I don't know that I realized a long time I can't compete in this kind of a world. I really couldn't. But I also was being affected by it, and I had to make that decision. Do I allow it to continue to transgress me, to trespass me, to affect me, or do I work to stop it? It's still affecting me if I'm working to stop it anyway, but at least I'm working for the day, and hopefully everyone else sees it, that we stop this nonsense. It is what drives that insanity, where mafioso is saying we can do that. We can stop another organized criminal syndicate better than you can, government. Another criminal syndicate. No one notices it, seems like, this stuff. And there's people that have noticed more than me, which I always am fascinated by. I wish I could really look at the chats, because sometimes you guys throw in some stuff in there that are really insightful. And I wish I could be around to see that and happen and comment to it. Sometimes not so much though. You gotta don't get all the swelled head down there in that chat room. Because I'm on high, remember. I'm over here in the big broadcaster, and all your minions are sitting down in the dungeons of the chat rooms, typing away. Some of you really do have insights, folks. You need to now put those in practice. A lot of the dialogue I see is not worthy, and that's what it kind of throws me off. That's why I can't. And I don't mean that dialogue. I mean the chatting is not consistent. I can't watch that. It distracts from my points, and I'm distracted now to talk about it. But we have a lot of wisdom in us if we would just apply it. That this is folks, I just can't tell you how important that first word told me. If it doesn't tell you, it tells me the uniformity of the problem against us. The other level of a war using a method that's been used across every government right now to take it down and put it in this system. They're taking down the belief systems of all peoples of the world, and they're not going to destroy those. We have to understand the technique. They don't destroy your belief system, whatever it is. Even the atheist is a religion, you know what I'm saying? I mean, everybody's got a belief system. They believe in something. You're going to be told you can believe in that, but go ahead and implement this felony against you, would you please? And they're going to give you all the reasons why you should, and you're going to do it. And those of you that speak out, you'll be called all the bad names, and they will focus on you and eventually take you down if you're not really, really smart. Even if you are, they're going to, I don't mean smart, intelligent. That's how they're doing it, smartly. They're taking all their smart devices, right? But it's not intelligent. It's not intelligent for us to not pay attention. The dialogue between the religions is a fact, of evidence that the religions are already done in, and their congregations aren't paying attention and don't know it. And this brings up another concept. I get another report. 97% of Americans don't care about global warming. Well, on the surface, that's fine. Yeah, you know, it's a fraud. I mean, but that's the problem then, isn't it? 97% of Americans should know enough about it to care that it's a fraud against them, that they should be voicing their complaint. They should be restricting and resisting this imposition that would come to dialogue you right outside your own bettered interests. That will sit up and take that from you, your better interest from you, and take possession to control it as well. And you are crickets. That I see this headline, 97% of Americans don't care about global warming. And so that's written, I'm telling you, that's written there so that you can say, okay, it's like the 97% of scientists that say global warming is a consensus by scientists to believe so. And then that's where you stop. Okay, fine, the scientists believe. You don't realize that's just a statistical relationship that they're agreeing with. If it's 97% of the scientists, and then you find out that it's only a small amount of scientists from the pool of all scientists. And it's more further knowledge. This is another report that even gets the term global warming, and I'm doing it myself, into your mind. It's out there. Speak about a thing, rightfully, wrongfully, as long as your name gets called. You have the advertisement you need. That 7% of Americans are asleep on this problem, something that's going to affect them, even though they don't care. The why they have to know to stand up. They have to care enough about themselves to know that if they don't care, that it's coming against them and they have to stop it. Is another technique that we have to throw off of us. And why I even bring that one up. It's part of this condition. It's part of this method. UN climate talk, these people, folks, they want to get this in so fast. They're so eager now. They can smell the blood here. UN climate talks start a day early. An early start a day earlier than planned will offer an opportunity to make this best possible use of the very limited time available to finalize negotiations. Were you part of those negotiations, or did they say you have a representation of your rights and property and your laws, folks? This is the method. I can see it in the titles. Negotiations for a world pact to curb global warming. You know, don't people see this fraud? I can't even really read more. I read that and go, who are these people? I mean, what kind of gods are these people that control the earth? What the audacity of hope, folks, is all I can think about these things. Negotiations for a world pact to curb global warming will start in Paris Sunday, November 29th, a day ahead of schedule. The UN said November 25th. As a report warned, 2015 could become the hottest year on record. And they only look at certain records. The Crunch UN Summit will be officially, see, for the word summit, folks, that means that there's a lot of people that are pretending to have talked to you, and you're part of that summit, and they make a record that you agreed. And this is, I've noticed they're using this word summit as well. They do this everywhere in order to make a record that you agreed with their beneficial meeting that they had for your benefit, and that by that you agree in what they now are going to a different governmental body to get done, which is their agenda. This UN summit will be officially opened by more than 150 heads of state and government on Monday. There's your representation. November 30th, as planned, making it the biggest gathering in the world's climate history, the world leaders in climate history. So, what did I tell you about when you see things about the biggest, the baddest in the world? You better pay attention. They've been told, these people are told, you're going to make this a thing. You're going to iron. They said, iron out your differences. We want this pact. This is on here, folks. They're taking your voice. They're taking your rights. They're taking everything by the fraud of the representation that they're putting in the world on this, based on this other felony. And what was it about, folks? Is it about the climate? We've talked about it. You know the answer is no. Because before, I had this on my board a long time ago to expose this. I brought it up. Ex-World Bank chief economist exposes failure of austerity deregulation. Showing us evidence, this is before now, that what they're going to enter into a pact about, the imposition of Agenda 2030 underneath the fighting of, to the enhancement of prosperity, the fighting of poverty, to impose austerity is already known as a failure. Is evidence, folks, is what I'm saying. I don't need to read these stories. I just tell you, this is the fact right here for you to put down in a bag of information, a folder of information, and approach somebody with. Say, what are you doing in light of these things to agree to a felony against me? Where is it written in your oath you could do that? That you're even misappropriating money, funds, public monies to do this. Have something in your mouth about this, folks. Go talk to us. Take this as evidence. A little-known speech of the United Nations University renowned Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz criticized Western approaches to addressing the global economic crisis for being obsessed with market solutions that cannot work. Well, he might be thinking of them in the wrong way, right? They're going to work for the system. It's not going to work for the markets. The markets are just other tools as well. I won't go on. They talk about economic development and cooperation. This is the method. Cooperation, collaboration, partnerships, teamwork, stakeholders is the method. Development is from to develop their bank sustainable debt system on people. It's in the names, economic cooperation and development. The economic cooperation, you're going to agree with this proposal of sustainable debt that we're going to develop in your people. And one of the things we found out was that migration was going to be the tool used to accomplish that. So the news isn't before us. We can see this is not a question. We have the tools, the evidence to know what is we're up against. And you have to understand, when I said that, I was pausing because I'm thinking about, okay, what's the point here? That's your notice. And once they gave it to you and you failed to respond, when you were crickets, you agreed. It's the same method to take control of your property, saying, I'm going to speak in the best interest, and since I have their best interest, you're going to listen to me for your state policy. And what that policy ends up being is a plunder on your whatever wealth you think you have, and containing your behavior to what is needed to advance through the development of the next servitude of the next generation, the future generation, the sustainable servitude in the world, utilizing these development banks. It's here for us to see, folks. And I understand your spirit may hang around for 3 days, so I might be getting in under the wire. I understand you're not supposed to speak ill of the dead, but we got 3 days. Maybe his spirit's still in transition. I'm going to say it. Maurice Strong, UN pioneer in green diplomacy, dies at 86. I couldn't be more thrilled. But look at the offspring this guy has created in the world. The concentrated evil spawned from this criminal. Otherwise, I'm sorry to hear it passing. There's nobody, whatever that is. If that's what he wanted. But he's a criminal. And I'm glad to see him gone. There's nothing, he has ruined, this guy and the people that he has helped out, this green diplomacy, has ruined people, has killed people, is going to kill more. It's the silent war against us. They reference the environmental diplomacy at the 1972 Stockholm conference, for those of you paying attention. This is what I've talked about over and over. This guy was instrumental in pushing this through and causing the harm and woe and damage to people in the globe. And I wondered, these guys get older and older and older. When are they leaving my existence? Well, I didn't think it was possible, but here it is. It's possible, folks. Maybe I'm being wrongly judgmental. Maybe I'm condemning myself in this. But I have not seen this guy actually bring anything on that he dies now is really an interest. That he didn't see the fruition of that pact is also of interest. I'm hoping there's hope that doesn't actually go through. I'm hoping that there's people in the United States government that really understand, because they've shown it before. The diplomats that go there, even though they shouldn't be there, actually understand that there's limitations on the United States. And a lot of these pacts don't go through because of those very problems. That every time they come back, they've tried to work out. These wordsmiths have tried to come out to try and work around another problem in order to alleviate or facially, transparently alleviate the restrictions that would be on the United States government in law. That Maurice Strong dying is I didn't rejoice, folks. But this guy has caused more harm, in my estimation, in my observation. It's partly what I have to do now is his work, is what we are up against. That I wish that his energy would go away, but it's going to be in the world a long time. The authors of this harm on the people of the world, one of them's gone. So enough said there. But and to go on to something else, and I don't want to cast aspersions on this guy. I felt him to be pretty amenable. I didn't never meet him. It's just a character. He's a celebrity in the world. But it was an interesting story here. It happened quite a little while ago, at the beginning of the month, to show who these people are on the stage. These people that get into government and these influential places. Another death that may have passed with or without your observation. Former Senator Fred Thompson had TV and film roles. He's dead at 73, happened to the first of the year. He died in Nashville after a recurrence of lymphoma at 73. I sort of remember him a long time ago. Amenable guy. I appreciated it. Had a deep voice and a smooth, presentation. Likable dude, it seemed at some point. What they say, a folksy demeanor. 6'6" with a booming voice and a folksy demeanor. It appeared in at least 20 motion pictures, and I won't go through them. But what I found interesting was how they described him. A Republican senator to 8 years who also acted in feature films on television has died, his family said in a statement. Thompson, a lawyer, and here it is, listen, a lawyer, All of a sudden now can't be so good, but at any rate, remember the Bar Association and their plans against you. He was a lawyer, as likable and folksy as he was. He alternated between politics and acting much of his adult life. And I thought that little sentence right there pretty much said it all. Lawyers, attorneys, politics and acting. I thought that said it pretty much all at one sentence. Don't know the gentleman, but the characters on this stage are typically these kinds of people that cross skill. What they do goes from lawyer to politics to acting, should tell you something about your government. When you find out all the attorneys sitting there in the government and they're all politicians, they must be acting. And what have I said over and over about the stage and the characters and these facades, these costumes? This is what we now see is the truth. So, don't want to disparage his passing. I thought he was a good guy. I like the folksy nature of him. But here we have it, right here, folks. This is probably the most sentient statement I've read in a long time. Thompson was a lawyer, alternated between politics and acting much of his adult life. There was really no difference, folks. Politics and acting and being an attorney. What can they get you to do, folks? What can they do? And they're acting. Are they so good that they can get you to even put the gun to your head and shoot you? Well, it seems to me I've got evidence that it's possible. And I wanted you to know about that. We tend to put these people on pedestals they don't deserve. In fact, they were supposed to be in a representative capacity and not leaders, which I've identified as the line that holds the bait for you to chomp on the hook that they're dangling. The leader. Now, who's the one holding the fishing pole, though, folks? That's the one you have to concern yourself with. So, in these gangs, the lawyers and the politicians and things, maybe even of things called countries, nations, the psychopaths in the offices, we have all these different scenarios that work on down, and one of the gangs that we have to deal with is the cops. The military, for Solomon. And I don't make light of that. I mean, it's, again, I just want to say the police, but I understand that that's sitting there. So, just kind of throw that in there for us. Just understand these are military operations going on. And so you start putting your mind up that level and you start to be able to see other things. Are they fact? I don't know. We're not there, but we can at least put them in the equation. And the categories of possibilities I tell you to build so that you can kind of be aware and have yourself free to see, have free association going on to focus in more quickly on what might be reality. That I saw this story in the gang plots and things going on, the false flags, the hoaxes and what all not. Millis, a cop charged with bomb threat, staged shootout, found dead in home. At first I kind of passed by it. The next day I woke up and said, wait a minute, that's something about that. About this, I should say. A former Millis police officer who was charged in connection with the shootout hoax and fake bomb threat in September was found dead in his home Thursday morning. The story goes on and on, but here's the point. I looked at this and I said, wow, what if this was another drill and the guy backed out and they caught him. And so they planted him with the hoax shootout and the fake bomb because it got out of hand. What if they've killed this guy and they've set him up? I don't know, folks. It's at least plausible as the stories we keep getting told on the other side. So a lot of this didn't make a lot of sense to me. Even though we've heard the craziness of some of the cops on the other side that actually look like they did this stuff, like the cop that went on years and years thieving money, figuring out how to thieve money from the systems. But this was all related to one event that I wondered, is this guy, did he start to get cold feet or say that's not going to happen. And so they made him, and then something slipped, and they were all going to be exposed. So they created this thing in order to blame him and make it look like that was his doing. I don't know, conjecture. But it was as plausible to me that that's going on. Why? Because I want to keep my mind, I want to remove a lot of the prejudices, that I focus my attention on certain things because I'm told that that's the way they are. Here's the point, that I'm even having to consider that should tell you we're living in some dire straits. I'm pretty sure that means the innocence has been washed from me pretty clearly. And I hope you too, and not just to the point to overestimate these, overcalculate these things. I would just want to bring it forward to say these are the possibilities of things that are going on. We don't know what's going on unless we get the facts, and that's where you have to change. Find something you can get the facts on, put it in stone, make the foundation, move from that foundation, and you'll be the one, if not only the only one, you'll be the one, maybe the only one, that knows from that foundation that you're looking at the lies around you. Otherwise, there's going to have people standing right next to you and doing that very same thing. And you'll all know what you're talking about. And everybody else who won't will probably attack you. And that's how you identify them pretty quickly. When you make a reasonable conclusion, or you make a reasonable action on a foundation and someone attacks you, it's like I told you a long time ago. When I have a cop come on me, if they ever do, I try not to let that happen, especially now where any interaction means your death. When they come on me and I'm not a criminal, then I know I'm dealing with a criminal when they start to impose themselves. And then I found the law that said that when they take a color, anybody takes a color of authority, it doesn't have to be official, but let's just leave it here. When a cop comes, even under the color of a cop authority, when it's actually military, that's another type felony. But when they come with that color of authority to blame you, that takes you outside of your peace, your right to be peaceful, that's a felony right on its face in most states I've found. It's felony theft by extortion under color of authority. It's a property right on the one side. It's conversion when it affects a private right of yours, or private interest, or your private right to be peaceful. I mean, what was their argument? If you were to consider this, what's their argument when you say, I just was keeping the peace, and they came and they breached the peace? How is a cop under costume making that felony? How is he going to answer that, if that's your answer? Something to think about, folks. I'm putting these concepts in practice. I'm not just thinking I know the Constitution. No, you have to apply these things. And that's even a tenuous position. Why? Because you got these bar members that will explain those shields and protections and limitations away. You have to know that's part of the battlefield. Do you not do anything? Well, no, because if you don't do anything, this is the game they've got. If you do nothing, they win anyway. Crickets. And then they come stomp you. And then they blame it on you. Like we hear going on. They're taking victim defense. They're taking it all away, folks. As I told you this a while back. I didn't realize that it would actually, I didn't think it was going to come on quite this quickly. I didn't really have that kind of a crystal ball. But I knew everything was in place, and I'm not surprised that it has come this quickly, actually. But it's still quite amazing to see anyway. Because when it came that quickly, it means that it really is a plan. That's another proof. That when you step up, when you do not be a cricket, and you step up and you expose, like they call the whistleblowers, you see the whistleblowers are getting attacked. Obama said he was going to open transparency. I told you that means that they're going to go undercover. They're just going to make it transparent to you. And you see the attack on whistleblowers. That we see evidence of that when you finally do stop being a cricket and you actually come out to expose some of this stuff. We see the evidence. And so here's my point about this story. It's not to put the fear. It's to say, okay, this is the reality. This is what's going to happen. You better have contingency plans. And the more you can cut yourself loose, the better. You don't have to cut your loose from everything. I mean, I get lots of people talking, well, I have a pension, or I got Social Security and this, and what do I do with that? Well, keep it. You earn the darn stuff. It doesn't matter. I mean, I've never seen that as an attachment. If you have a weakness in that area, find a way to get around it. Don't cut your nose to spite your face. That's not what I've ever been saying. You don't have to clean the slate and oh, it's not untouchable. No, we're in this thing. You better work smart. You better figure out ways to keep yourself viable. But the more you're attached to the system, the more they're going to be able to mess with you when you do step up, and you have to take that into consideration. Drone pilots have bank accounts and credit cards frozen by feds for exposing U.S. murder. Again, the silent weapons for quiet wars. The data, the digital world is your prison if you choose it as your only option. For having the courage to come forward and expose the drone program for the indiscriminate murder that it is, 4 vets are under attack from the government they once served. The United States government failed to deter them through threats of criminal prosecution and clumsy attempts to intimidate their families. Now, 4 former Air Force drone operators turned whistleblowers have had their credit cards and bank accounts frozen, according to the human rights attorney Jesselyn Radak. That's enough I'll say, folks. These people came out. They were just letting people know what's going on. The government turned on them, and they did it by electronic means. Anything you have in the state is susceptible to control. If you want to go to a currency that's digital, you want to go to a cashless society, this is what we're talking about. If whenever you are considered to be a suspicion, if you're an activist like in France that is going to be put on house arrest, they don't need any reasonable suspicion of more than that they just didn't like what you were doing, they turn off your switch. That's a reality. You can ignore it, and you can fear it and stay in it and do nothing, or you can make alterations because you see how they play the game. That's all I'm telling you. There's evidence and proofs. I'm not a lunatic to tell you if you get a digital lifestyle that they will be able to interfere with your life to no end. Remember, don't forget what they said first, that the government came after them with intimidation and criminality. That's a tough one to weather, I'll tell you that. But guess what? In my view, that's a felony, isn't it? As soon as they don't, they've proven that they didn't have the right, they did it under color, to do an intimidation that breached the peace of the people that was supposed to be kept by the officers that were doing it. That's a felony. That's a 2 felonies, one in conversion as well. That's the basics, folks. It gets way easier here once you start figuring this out. I'm just trying to lay it out for you. I just try to, I talk very kind of summarily, actually. There's a little bit behind this, but it's not that much harder. This is not that big a question. This is not just knowing the Constitution or the laws of the state or whatever. It's knowing what they apply to, how they're applied, how they're used against you, and what the limitations are that expose these people for being the criminals in the officialdom that they are. This really was supposed to be a peaceful place, and the law was supposed to make the peace, and the cops, the sheriff in particular, we can see that directly, was to keep the peace from being breached. The problem was that the government itself became the breacher of the peace, and we were crickets. And we don't have much time left, I don't think. I mean, that sounds like there's going to be a switch flipped. It doesn't come that way either. I don't know how to explain this one. It's an incremental problem. But the day that it comes against you is the day you find out that there's no one around you and you weren't really planned because maybe you didn't want to look at it. Maybe you didn't want to listen behind the woodshed and you tuned out because it's just too kind of scary and didn't realize, no, this is not scary, this is reality. And we have to realize that sometimes there's boogeymen under the bed and sometimes there's somebody peeping in your window. And he's probably got a badge on. We have to come to terms with this. And you got to kind of put your mind in these places. Okay, what am I going to do about that? What can I do about that? You may find it's better to find the limitations and maybe even bolster them later than it is to find out in the moment. You don't have a bucket of water for that fire. So the drone operators are being attacked. Whistleblowers, so-called. You see, this is a fraud. Whistleblowers are going to be protecting all that. All that was just that's a ruse to get everybody out to be able to attack them. They make it life difficult. You just have to know that's the plan. That's how it works. The more of us that understand that, the more of this we can get contingencies and alternatives, thumb our nose at that and move in ways that they can't really keep up, and then hopefully have more people around. So if they do the dastardly deeds, you got a little protection there, even if your family has to do it, folks. And this is another problem. Your families think you're nut, right? Because they just don't want to get it. They just don't want to believe it's really like this. But you just got to be gentle and persistent and caring enough to know that you got to find the ways to communicate to people. Maybe your family's not the people you talk to. Maybe you find someone else that can talk to your family. I don't know. But we as a people have to work this out very quickly. Because another report here, the Supreme Court, there's a Supreme Court case in the works that soon may remove your right to hire a lawyer. Think about how this works. Think about this. Now, this might be a special kind of a condition. It doesn't matter. They're making it so you can't defend yourself when they steal all your assets underneath the crime of forfeiture allowance, which is typically a crime against the government for something that's within the commercial code of the government's laws. People don't understand how to do this, but this is how it ends up working. The United States Supreme Court could grant prosecutors the power to stop from using your own money. See, this is the switch they get to flick. This is a different style of switch. You better have an alternative. And you better be able to have it in a way they can't figure it out, and then they don't know how you continue. Well, we got all his money and his property. Well, first of all, you shouldn't have had any property, right? Not in your name and not by ways they can find it. Folks, get a clue what's going on and how the big boys work is how you also need to find out and how to work. And you don't make it real sophisticated. Make it real simple. It's like putting something right underneath their nose that they can't touch. You don't let them know about it. It's just the way it's done. When they look at you, they don't find anything. When they look at you and they give you a name and it's the wrong name, you go to the state and you find out, hey, that name doesn't exist. That's fraud what you just done. You got them again, folks. Is it silver bullets? No. Are they perfect shields? No. But they're at least something you get to do against these kinds of things where the Supreme Court will take a lawyer. And what good were they anyway? But anyway, this is focusing on some things you thought you had the right to a lawyer. The Constitution says so. They're carving out a place that's not the fact. The attorneys are doing this, the Bar Association members and agreeers. If you're just a membership, if you even agree to that those policies, you are in association with it. To stop you from using your own money to hire a defense attorney in the major causes the justices are considering. Consider that. They say, use your money. What money are they talking about? If it's in a can somewhere or hidden somewhere, do they think they can find it? If they can't find that money, do you think they can stop you from using that money? No, they're only talking about money in the state, property in the state. What's that? The stuff registered with and in the states and the instrumentalities. Get it out. The Lewis versus United States federal government in Lewis versus United States, the federal government is arguing it has the power to freeze all of defendants' assets, including those not earned through crime. Quote, what the government proposes to do is financially cripple someone before they've been convicted, before they've had a trial, and not allow them to use assets that are theirs to try to match the government in the courtroom. That's what the defense attorney says. Okay, that's the logic. The point is, this is an actual case that threatens these conditions. How is this going to turn out? I don't know. When you read the story, and you need to read the story, you'll see it doesn't turn exactly so cleanly on that point. There's other factors which they're using to erode the ability. This is no different. This is a very serious question because of the Kim.com problem. They've done the same thing to him. Luckily, I think it was New Zealand that freed up some money that he could actually use to defend himself. And this is on a case where the DOJ jumped out of their territory to go after someone who has never been in the land and never touched the government. I don't know how this is going to affect him, but this is a very serious matter if you start to think about this. They can literally, in his case, is costing millions. Do you have millions in alternative contingency funds to come against a government that's set against you, folks? Now, granted, he's doing a mega thing, but notwithstanding, on your scale, do you have almost entire separate life that you can live to fight a foe that was supposed to be there protecting you, who lies and has been given license to lie? I don't think anybody really has. So This is the day, folks. This is not fear. This is the reality. And so you got to choose the battles wisely as well. That's why I keep telling you. You don't walk into this, oh, I'm with righteous indignation and make the world right overnight. It's not going to happen. You have to understand where we're at, and you're going to have to learn it quick, folks. We don't have too much time. I was hoping behind the woodshed I was giving everybody what they needed, and people would hear it, come and listen and take away what they needed to and become formidable in their own right, be empowered. It doesn't look like that's the norm. It really doesn't. I'm amazed. I'm dealing in a group of people we're all in the same need, and yet they'll fight me on the very things that they don't want to do themselves, and that's why they fight me. And thank you, Solomon. That's the conflict of interest. They really don't want to get their hands involved. They don't want to roll their sleeves up. And that's my only request in lots of examples. Roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty, folks. This is it. It's probably the cleanest work you're ever going to end up doing in the end result. Protect the future if you can, the way you may have felt that it was being done, that was stolen by these people. Now, on the same side, the same point, that we find the courts destroying lots of things, making excuses, carving out ways that the government is going to, giving carte blanche power to the government that was supposed to be limited. We find also another report for those of you 420 advocates, and not necessarily that, more than medical. 420, the state Supreme Court rules cannabis in the blood does not constitute impairment. And I bring this forward just to let you know there's ways to look at this. Even the Supreme Court can find it. And this one's pretty straightforward logic. It was the same reason, I believe, and I don't know if they talk about this, that why, if they tested you for alcohol, that they couldn't, and initially, they couldn't just get you for being intoxicated, operating while intoxicated, because a number does not mean is not the fact of the consequence. That this is where it seems that this case draws the line. Just because you have you can test for however the test shows that you have cannabis materials in the blood, it would not constitute impairment. Was, I think, the same reason why the legislature came back out and said, well, then we're going to designate a number as impaired, and then the presumption's on you to throw out how it wasn't. They flipped the burden. And if you analyze it this way, you understand how you're being done as well within the system. They flip the burden because the legislature does that. I think that's what's going to happen here. I don't know how they're going to do it quite yet, because when you read this little report, you see it's not going to be quite so obvious. And in particular, because, and this is very, very interesting to see as well, because despite what the federal government says cannabis has no use, legitimate use, that states found it had a medical use, completely obliterating that theory under why it's regulated at all, partly of what the drug war is over, another tool to diminish the need of the drug war, that the medical use puts this beyond what alcohol was, which essentially is a poison to your body, but let's not go there. A useful tool if you keep it at the tool side. But at any rate, that medical marijuana now brings this into the category of pharmaceuticals that have to be shown, they're prescribed to some level that has been agreed that won't impair you. This is not going to be such an easy test. You can't do this test in the field, I don't think. I want you to know about that part, so those of you that need it as a medicine or that want to recreate with it, because I see some big holes in the capacity of the government to come after us, they're using these cannabis laws as the doors that they get to open to come after you, actually. They're legalizing what was actually not illegal before, but everyone didn't know that because it was commercial what was illegal and lawful before, not recreational, what they call recreational. It's not recreational. It's just your private use. It's not recreational. You use it as a part of your life. That's not recreational. We have these words we throw on it. In fact, they did that with the miners. Well, I'm a recreational miner. As soon as they did that, they got no protection. And the court told them that, but they don't want to agree. So be very careful here. I want to point out not just that, cannabis users, you can't be killed. They'll get you, folks. Be careful. Don't let this go away just because it's in your blood. They can't constitute impairment. They'll figure out how to get that. But this gives you, when you read this case, it gives you how to analyze your condition to set yourself up with the right discussion that if they do put the presumption on you like they did with alcohol, you have an additional answer. Yeah, but what was where was the guidance that said that no different than if I take a Vicodin, so many an hour, that's not considered impairment because I have a medical condition, and you can't stop that with the other doctor. The other licensee says it's okay. That's my government license through the licensee to operate this way. What is your standard consistent with the medical use of a material for that impairment? Is a defense that you'll be able to use for a while until you read to find out how they figured that little loophole out. So I think these are big traps. Here's a little case giving you notice of the way to figure out how this will work. I assume that we're going to try, and this may have to be tested. They will try to do what they did with alcohol, where they set a limit. Whatever the test says, whatever the test will say, they'll find a limit that they say would presumably affect anybody to a level of impairing them. My comment to you is that level then will have to be equal to whatever a pharmaceutical drug is allowed to be in your system and still allow you to operate machinery. They warn you to be careful about operating machinery, but I don't think they've established that you're impaired to operate the machinery. And at law, that's the problem. So without any more discussion, I can't go deeply on this. I just can touch it for you. I think it's important to understand this. I know it's a lot legalistic in a way, but that's the world we live in, and if we're not able to address it, these are the kinds of things they attack us with. I guess inside somehow, I just flashed on me. See, when they took me out on my child abuse, state systemic child abuse that's committed through the child services system and through the UN law of child rights. When I did a documentary to expose that a long time ago, I was taken out because of this kind, not this cannabis, it was just a regular traffic violation that wasn't. See, they fabricate these charges, and I gave them what I could as far as a resistance until they realized that I did have the right answer, that they were going to be found out to be committing the fraud that they thought they had me for, to get rid of me for a while, to take out that documentary, which was in a public place. It was in a PEG access facility, the existence of which disappeared when I got back out. But they use these kinds of state laws in order to tie you up. But when they found out I wasn't going to be so easily taken down, they then just gave me the riot act. Listen, the judge is just not going to listen to you. He knows that the law is the law. They're not going to let you do that. They're not going to let you get away with having them pay me to put in your paperwork when they only gave me $200 to do your defense, and they're not going to pay me to do that and get you off. The state has costs. So here's the deal. No, so what do? I've had to make that decision, so I don't judge anybody having to make that decision. Does the lizard lose a little bit of tail and not be devoured by the eagle? Or does the lizard stand up and defy the eagle and be devoured? You make that decision for yourself. I had to make it. I'm still here. So, I understand there are these compromises. They're not a compromise in principle. There's a compromise in practicality, pragmatism. That you can win, you can be right, and there's a force bigger than you. That you have to weigh the costs of that. So if you have these ideas, I talk about cannabis not constituting impairment just because it's in your blood, and understand the dynamic behind alcohol and understand the difference in what now has happened to cannabis, you may have a better word in your mouth as they try to use these things against us to tie our lives up, even if it was innocently just to be a parasite off your life. You make it, I told you, folks, I wished everybody who got a ticket would fight their ticket substantially. It would bog the system down. It would cost so much time and money and effort and make so much embarrassment. They couldn't do what they do. But we're crickets to all that. We've chosen to make excuses, and I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it doesn't cause hardship in other places, but this is how they work it. They work on your choice between the hardship you'll accept versus the one you won't. That's how they win. So the more you can fortify yourself in certain positions, certain places, certain ways, the way you start to limit your exposure to these things. And your answer about how much of the tail they take becomes a lot smaller too, I found out. So here, I'll just let you. I let them take a little bit of the lizard's tail so they wouldn't devour me, take me out of the picture over a fraudulent charge that the judge was, even though, like I told you folks, what did I tell you about that? The testimony from the cop was of my friend that he was a man, the fact of which meant something. The judge knew that. The judge says, I know where you're going with that testimony. I can't let that testimony that the cop just gave into the record. I cannot accept the testimony that says that you're a man. If I did that, we couldn't prosecute anybody. Was the very same thing the lizard has to look at when they say, we're just going to convict you. What do? You spend 5 to 10 years for nothing and be out of the picture? Or do you give them the couple $100 they wanted to pay back the attorney for cheating you out of your time and energy, and you go on with your life with a new understanding? That's a decision everybody has to make. I don't not make that for anybody. I have a friend who he spent 69 days and didn't eat. That's how he plays it. Almost killed him, but that's who he is. Actually, in a way that was good, because I saw that before I had to make my decision. I didn't want to be out of the game 69 days and have my health destroyed to try and prove a point that really didn't go anywhere at one level. It did go somewhere, but not near as the harm that he caused himself, probably righteously, but again, pragmatically was not very good. We have to make these decisions. You have to know what the reality is. This is not utopia world that we were told. We aren't even close. This isn't the best we can do, even though they'll tell you that, this is the best system we can do. No, it's not. It's a system of plunder, and it's run in a military fashion and under military procedures. If you look at very carefully. If you call it out, they'll take you out. If you know that that's the case and act in response to that without calling it out, you're going to go a whole lot farther. That's all I can tell you. So, enough of the detrimental. I'd like to get on to some of this other thing for those of you all and us maybe all needing help. And with the inventions, I always say it's kind of exciting to get into what we come up with for inventions in the world to help each other out. And apparently this is the good side of life. No more fillings, as dentists reveal new tooth decay technology. Take a bite out of crime, folks, by you engaging. Now here's the technology that'll keep those choppers in your mouth, so you can continue to take a bite out of crime, the government kind, where they reveal this new tooth decay treatment. It actually is very fascinating. They don't need it's developed out of London, and they develop a pain-free filling that allows teeth to repair themselves without drilling or injections. I don't know the Frankensteinian view of this. Just on the surface, I was pretty fascinated by it. The tooth rebuilding technique developed at King's College London does away with fillings and instead encourages teeth to repair themselves. I guess kind of like a frog growing another leg, isn't it? We've heard about this technology. Now they're actually making it available to us. Well, if you can afford it, but here it is anyway. Fascinating technology. The tooth decay is normally removed by drilling, after which the cavity is filled with a material such as an amalgam or a composite resin. The new treatment, called electrical accelerated and enhanced remineralization, accelerates the natural movement of calcium and phosphate minerals into the damaged tooth. You're plating your tooth back with the materials that you need. So fascinating. It's a two-step process. First prepares the damaged area of enamel, then uses the tiny electric current to push minerals into the repair site. It could be available within 3 years. So cool stuff. But that's the utopian. That's the rainbows and unicorn farts. That it's there. The problem is, do you have access to it? And we have a cost factor always. And then we see this next story brings us back down. I want to get all excited about our current technology, but there's a reality. The rise of do-it-yourself dentistry, despite this technique, the rise of do-it-yourself dentistry for Britons doing their own fillings because they want to avoid a DHS bill. This is your health care. This is Obama's scare. Now we're seeing how it actually works from Britain. A missed appointment and resulting in a 25-pound charge led Alex to become a do-it-yourself dentist, using an emergency over-the-counter dental first aid kit bought from the pound store. The pound store, here they got the dollar store. It gets a little bit more expensive in Britain. The 38-year-old building engineer from Glasgow began fixing his own teeth rather than run up bills. Quote, I couldn't justify going and getting my teeth out when we can't afford nappies, he said. Folks, that I don't even want to read. I was going to read a little more, but you understand what this is: a building engineer that can't afford nappies has health insurance that doesn't want to address that system to pull his teeth, let alone pay the expense of going to get them rebuilt. This was evidence. I was just shaking my head. Fantastic technology in one mouth, in one breath, and can't use it in the next in social medicine that the Obamacare resembles, if not exactly is. An engineer who can't afford a nappy has to decide to become his own dentist. Is your future in austerity, folks? It is what they call prosperity. You have to make this connection. Here, the wonder of what we can do to help each other, and it won't be accessible to you, is really the crime of the centuries. In a day when no one should be for want. I've told you, folks, is an insight. I know maybe it's conjecture. Maybe I just don't have this pea brain's not big enough. In 1933, when they ultimately got rid of they just made money to be paper. They put everything in the promise to be paid in the future. That was the day there was no money spent on anything. That from that day till today, they've done everything on a promise, on vapor, on nothing. That when you see that everybody in the world does all this on a promise, why couldn't we promise enough to ourselves to not want as a people? That these people in the climate change nonsense, the UN, banksters, all these, whatever name you want to put on them, are those that are taking that promise for themselves that you never stopped. It's all right there for us if we'll just step up. How is it some engineer can't afford nappies and has to do his own dentistry, that when he's got a social medical plan is the problem? Here we have it. Senate votes to allow veterans to use state medical marijuana programs on the Veterans Day Eve. This is when this story came out. If the federal government has said marijuana, cannabis is an Article 1 controllable drug, why did the Senate just vote that medical marijuana has a viable medical use? That they had to give this to the veterans to do in the states tells you another fiasco in the governmental systems. The Senate has passed the measure that will allow veterans living in legal medical marijuana states to take advantage of those programs without negative consequences from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Who are these criminals and discompassionate people that would allow this harm on us? You really have to start looking at this. You really have to start understanding this dynamic. They're doing it to us. We're allowing it. We have to stop, folks. We just find the thing that don't work in your life and fix it, even if it's personal and private to you. But if it's like I talk here the governmental interaction stuff that's just killing our people, keeping them harmed, abusing them. We're agreeing to that as that abuser as the abused. We really have to leave a better future, I think. I hope. So thank you for tuning in today. Do appreciate all everyone's support, all your emails, markonthebeach@yahoo.com. Any donations you can make for information to me, Mark on the Beach. But if you have donations in finances, you can help Grimner at reallibertymedia.com for the space he provides for me and the digital work behind the scenes to keep that all going. To give you the broadcaster and the place to keep the podcasts, WT, worldtruth.org. Grammy Mary runs that part of it. They could use donations of money, I'm sure, to pay for the servers that you're hearing me from, and the accounts that they give, on Spreaker, for those of you on Spreaker. Then you have UCY, gracious enough to give me the place to broadcast every Sunday and then rebroadcast on Thursday. I'm sure Jules could use some help there, even if it's not money. Maybe you can have offer anything else, but offer, folks, help where you can. the broadcasters, however many we have and still have. Thank you very much, and donate to those people. They're helping as well. Just getting the word out, folks. This is all we have for ourselves right now. And then once we have enough, hopefully we move, even if it's a little before our time to move. Just start doing something. Thank you for tuning in today. Take care.